Picture the searing, agonizing pain of scalding hot liquid engulfing your tiny body. What could drive a person to inflict such unimaginable cruelty upon a defenseless infant, a child barely old enough to walk or talk? This is a story that will plunge you into the depths of human depravity and leave you grappling with the question, what truly happened to this innocent soul? Welcome to Crime Stories Network. I thank you my viewers for your support as we keep bringing true crime stories, especially against children abuse, neglect and exploitation. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. July 3, 2009. A day filled with hope and new beginnings as Carlnelus Bables entered the world in Dallas, Texas. To his parents, Byron Bables and Jasmine Thompson, he was a precious gift. Jasmine, originally from Arkansas, was just 19 years old when Jan, affectionately known as Bam Bam or Bamster by everyone who loved him, was born. His father, Byron, was a bit older, around 37. Jan wasn't the first child in the family. He had an older brother, just about a year and a half his senior. Together, these two young boys were part of a wider family, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who would soon come to cherish the newest addition. By all accounts, little Jan was a delightful child. He was described as bright and talkative, a toddler full of life and curiosity. With his black hair, dark brown eyes, and a smile that could light up a room, he quickly captured the hearts of those around him. But beneath the surface of this seemingly happy beginning, young Jan was born into a family life that was already facing significant challenges. Challenges that would ultimately cast a dark shadow over his short time on this earth. Barely after Jan's arrival, the first significant crack appeared in the foundation of his young life. His father, Byron Bables, faced legal trouble and was convicted of felony forgery. This meant that shortly after holding his newborn son, Byron would be separated from his family, serving time in prison. While Byron was incarcerated, Jan's mother, Jasmine, didn't remain alone for long. She soon began a relationship with a man named Carlnelus Delaney Simmons. Carlnelus was significantly older than Jasmine, around 37 years old at the time, but Carlnelus was not a man without a past. In fact, his history was deeply troubling. Years prior, in 1994, he had been convicted of homicide. He had taken another man's life during a fight outside a bar in South Dallas and had served 15 years in prison for that crime, along with additional time for drug charges. He was released in late 2007, hoping to rebuild his life. However, Carlnelus' attempts at staying out of trouble proved short-lived. Just 2 years after his release, he was once again arrested by Dallas police. This time, the charges were again related to drugs. He openly admitted to selling vials of PCP for just $15 each. After serving more jail time for these new offenses, he re-entered Jasmine's life. Meanwhile, Jan's father, Byron, was released from prison on parole in September of 2010. Understandably, he wanted to spend as much time as possible with his young son, who was now over a year old. But Jan and his older brother were living with Jasmine and her new boyfriend, Carlnelus. Carlnelus' apartment had a known reputation. It was a place where drugs were used and sold, a drug house. Knowing this, what do you think of Jasmine's decision to bring her two young children into that environment? What might have been going through her mind? By November of 2010, Jasmine had moved in with Carlnelus into a new apartment within the same complex, located at 8119 Skillman Street in the Lake Highlands neighborhood of Dallas. She was fully aware that Carlnelus was a convicted murderer. Yet, she reportedly brushed off his past, stating that his crime happened long before he knew her. Jasmine also knew that Carlnelus was actively involved in drug dealing. Did she truly not see this as a potential danger to her two young sons? She often left the boys in Carlnelus' care while she went to work. Her reasoning? She said he treated the boys like they were his own, and she claimed she didn't have the financial means to hire a babysitter. Knowing Carlnelus' history of violence and his current involvement in illegal activities, do you believe Jasmine's justifications were reasonable? Or were there other factors at play that led her to place her children in such a potentially perilous situation? November 4, 2010. It was a seemingly ordinary Thursday in Dallas, but for young Jabraylon, it would be a night that would forever alter the course of his short life. That evening, his mother, Jasmine Thompson, needed to seek medical attention herself. She went to the hospital to receive treatment for a urinary tract infection. This meant that 16-month-old Jabraylon and his brother, who was just shy of his 3rd birthday, were left in the sole care of Carlnelus Delaney Simmons. The night progressed, and as the clock approached midnight, at precisely 11:49 p.m., the calm in the apartment at 8119 Skillman Street was broken by a frantic 911 call. The voice on the other end was Carlnelus Simmons. In his call to the emergency operator, Carlnelus stated that Jayan had been burned while he was cooking in the kitchen. He claimed he was heating up water on the stove and didn't realize his baby son was behind him. According to Carlnelus, when he turned around, all the hot water spilled, hitting Jayan and causing his skin to come off. Think about that for a moment. Almost midnight. Carlnelus said he was heating up water while cooking. What kind of meal do you think he might have been preparing at that late hour for 2 young toddlers? Does that detail strike you as odd? Sometime during Carlnelus's call to 911, Jasmine, with the help of some friends, managed to return home from the hospital. Imagine her panic, arriving back to find her baby injured. She tried her best to provide care for little Jayan, following the instructions relayed by the 911 operator over the phone. The situation was clearly critical. Moments later, the sirens wailed as paramedics with Dallas Fire Rescue arrived at the apartment. They quickly assessed Jabraylon's condition and, recognizing the severity of his injuries, rushed him to Parkland Memorial Hospital. What was the true extent of the burns that little Jabraylon had suffered? And would the explanation given by Carlnelus Simmons hold up under scrutiny? The answers to these questions would soon begin to unravel in the sterile environment of the hospital emergency room. At Parkland Memorial Hospital, the true horror of Jabraylon's injuries began to emerge. Doctors in the burn unit conducted a thorough examination, and what they found was devastating. Little Jabraylon had suffered 3rd-degree burns across approximately 30% of his tiny body. These weren't just minor scalds, they were deep, tissue-damaging burns on both of his legs, his buttocks, and his right hand and wrist. The severity of these injuries immediately raised alarm bells for the medical team. Within minutes of Jabraylon's arrival, the authorities were notified. Officers Alyssa Wattis, Ronald Carroll, and a 3rd officer arrived at the hospital at 12:10 a.m. They found Jasmine in the emergency room, understandably distraught, holding her severely burned child. While at the hospital, Carlnelus Simmons reiterated his story to the responding officers. He stuck to his initial account, claiming he was standing in the kitchen, holding a pot of boiling water, when young Jayan suddenly came running up to him from behind. He told the officers that in his surprise, he dropped the hot water on the floor and heard the boy scream. He then said he picked up Jabraylon and placed him on a bed, only then realizing the toddler's skin was peeling off, prompting him to call 911. Jasmine, understandably in shock and distress, confirmed to the officers that she was not home when the injuries occurred. She explained that Carlnelus had called her to tell her that Jabraylon had been burned. She also stated that when she had left home herself that evening, little Jayan was perfectly fine, playing and uninjured. Carlnelus corroborated this, confirming that the only other person in the apartment at the time of the alleged accident was Jabraylon's older brother. However, the medical professionals in the burn unit, experts in assessing such trauma, had a very different opinion. They explained to the investigating officers that the extensive and patterned nature of Jabraylon's burns simply did not align with Carlnelus's account of accidentally splashing the child with water from a dropped pot. Think about that. You have the person responsible claiming it was a simple accident, but the medical experts, who see these kinds of injuries regularly, are saying the evidence points to something else entirely. Who are you more inclined to believe at this point, and why? Recognizing the inconsistencies in the story and the severity of the child's injuries, the police needed to gather more information. Both Jasmine and Carlnelus signed consent forms, granting the authorities permission to thoroughly search their apartment on Skillman Street. Following this, Carlnelus Delaney Simmons was transported to Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives were waiting to conduct a more detailed and intense interview. What kind of questions do you think the detectives asked Carlnelus? Would his story remain consistent under closer scrutiny? And what crucial pieces of evidence might the police uncover back at the apartment that could potentially reveal the truth behind Jabraylon's horrific burns? The morning after the horrific burning, police investigators meticulously documented the scene inside the apartment on Skillman Street. In the kitchen, things appeared almost normal, yet subtly out of place. A box of hamburger helper sat on the counter, alongside a package of pork chops resting on top of the refrigerator. It seemed to corroborate Carlnelus's statement that he was preparing a meal. But again, the late hour of almost midnight for such a meal for toddlers raises questions, doesn't it? Near the stove, a towel lay on the floor. Was this used to clean up a spill? Or did it play some other role in the events of that night? On the stove itself, a large pot contained only a small amount of water. Was this the pot Carlnelus claimed to be using? But the seemingly normal kitchen held a dark secret. Upon closer inspection of the cabinets above the stove, officers discovered 8 plastic baggies of cocaine nestled inside a clear plastic bowl. And in the refrigerator, they found an even more alarming stash, 95 brown vials filled with liquid PCP. This wasn't just a casual user, this was a significant quantity of illegal drugs, confirming the apartment's reputation as a drug house. What does this tell you about the environment these young children were living in? The search of the apartment also yielded a significant amount of alcohol, 27 bottles of various flavored vodkas, along with 16 other bottles of vodka. Scattered throughout were 17 cigarette lighters, 3 condoms, 4 empty cigar boxes, 4 loose cigars, a box of cut-up cigarettes, and a small amount of cash. In Carlnelus's pants pocket, police found over $1,000 in cash, which was also taken as evidence. Based on the inconsistencies in Carlnelus's story at the hospital and the evidence uncovered in the apartment, the Dallas Police CA unit took action. The following morning, November 5, Carlnelus Delaney Simmons was arrested and charged with injury to a child, a first-degree felony. Thankfully, Jabraylon's older brother was not physically harmed during this incident. Recognizing the unsafe environment, Child Protective Services stepped in, and the young boy was placed in the care of his grandmother, ensuring his immediate safety. The discovery of such a large quantity of drugs in the home where 2 young children were living is deeply concerning. Does this new information change your perception of Carlnelus's character and his potential involvement in Jabraylon's injuries? And what responsibility, if any, do you think Jasmine bears for allowing her children to live in such a dangerous place? The investigation was now moving forward, but the full truth behind what happened to little Jabraylon was still yet to be revealed. Back at Parkland Hospital, the reality of Jabraylon's condition was grim. The third-degree burns covering such a large percentage of his small body placed him in immediate critical condition. His tiny life hung precariously in the balance. Despite the severity of Jabraylon's injuries and the arrest of Carlnelus Simmons, something truly perplexing occurred. Jabraylon's own mother, Jasmine Thompson, continued to voice her support for Simmons. Even with the medical professionals stating the burns were inconsistent with an accident, and with Simmons facing serious felony charges, Jasmine reportedly still considered him a good person. Why do you think Jasmine maintained this stance? Was it denial, fear, or something else entirely? For the next 5 agonizing weeks, little Jabraylon fought for his life within the sterile walls of the hospital's burn unit. His small body was connected to a multitude of tubes and a breathing machine, a stark image of his vulnerability. Imagine the constant fear and uncertainty that must have surrounded his bedside. Doctors did everything in their power to save him. He underwent multiple surgeries, including one where they had to remove approximately 60% of his intestines due to the extensive damage from the burns. A second surgery followed, but the damage was immense. Jabraylon's tiny body was constantly battling infections, a common and dangerous complication with severe burns. Tragically, his little kidneys eventually began to fail, and his body swelled up so severely that he became almost unrecognizable as the bright-eyed Bam Bam his family knew and loved. Despite the tireless efforts of the medical team, at 8:53 p.m. on Saturday, December 11, 2010, little Jabraylon Bables passed away at the Children's Medical Center Dallas. The horrific injuries and the relentless infections had simply been too much for his young body to overcome. He had endured 36 long days in the hospital since that terrible night. Some trauma, especially for someone so young, is just too much for the human body to bear. A 16-month-old boy, barely out of babyhood, had suffered immensely. What are your thoughts on the level of pain and suffering Jabraylon must have endured in those final weeks? It's a heartbreaking reality to consider. Following Jabraylon's tragic death, the Dallas County Medical Examiner officially confirmed what the doctors had suspected: the little boy's death was ruled a homicide. The focus now shifted firmly to the legal proceedings against Carlnelus Delaney Simmons. In the days after her son's passing, while making funeral arrangements, Jasmine Thompson gave a phone interview. Even in the face of such overwhelming evidence and the medical examiner's ruling, Jasmine still referred to Carlnelus as a good person. She expressed how much it would hurt her if his actions were intentional, stating she had trusted him. It's a stance that leaves many wondering, what could possibly explain her continued support for a man accused of such a horrific act? However, other members of Jabraylon's family saw things very differently. His aunt, Veronica, stated in an interview that based on the severity and pattern of the baby's injuries, she believed Carlnelus had intentionally hurt him, even suggesting it was torture. Jabraylon's father, Byron, echoed this sentiment, expressing the deep pain and difficulty in believing anyone could harm his child. He stated his immediate focus was on burying his son and finding out the truth at the trial. The legal process against Carlnelus Simmons began to unfold. He ultimately pleaded guilty to the drug charges that were also pending against him. However, he entered a plea of not guilty to the much more serious charge of injury to a child. This set the stage for a trial where the details of Jabraylon's final weeks would be laid bare. During the trial, the prosecution presented compelling testimony from the 3 doctors who had treated Jabraylon in the hospital. All 3, including board-certified experts in child abuse pediatrics, testified unequivocally that the nature of Jabraylon's burns indicated he had been immersed in a hot liquid. Their expert opinion was that these were not accidental injuries. In a heartbreaking detail, they also noted that the burn pattern suggested the little boy had instinctively curled himself into a fetal position, trying to protect himself from the scalding liquid. The defense, in an attempt to counter this powerful medical testimony, presented a pediatrician who had reviewed the case documents. This doctor argued that the burns appeared to be accidental and could have been caused by splattering water, suggesting that Carlnelus might have been trying to help the child after a boiling water incident. Ultimately, it was up to the jury to weigh the evidence and decide the truth. On May 4, 2012, after hearing all the testimonies and reviewing the evidence, the jury reached their verdict. They found Carlnelus Delaney Simmons guilty of the first-degree felony charge of injury to a child with significant bodily injury. Following the conviction, Carlnelus Simmons was handed a significant sentence, 99 years in prison for the injury to a child charge, plus an additional 5 years for each of his 2 pending drug charges. This lengthy sentence reflected the severity of the crime in the eyes of the court. Considering the medical examiner's ruling of homicide, why do you think the charges against Carlnelus Simmons weren't upgraded to murder? What are your thoughts on the jury's verdict of injury to a child and the resulting 99-year sentence? Did justice prevail for little Jabraylon? If you found this video impactful, please like and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that shed light on important issues. Share this video to help raise awareness. And let's all commit to creating a safer world for every child. Thank you for watching.